What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Astro Bot, and an interesting topic I think about it. I actually have two other ones that I'm going to make more Astro Bot videos in the next week. I mean, the game comes out 2 weeks today. You got review scores coming out eventually, so over the next 2 weeks, we'll be covering this game quite a bit on the channel. Very excited. It's one of my most anticipated games. The issue is, are they pushing this game enough? Is there enough promotion? That's what I want to talk about in this video. So this was actually, talked to me by a community member of the channel, great guy, been around for a very long time, Mr. Happa on Twitter, and he brought it up, right, where it's like, is it weird that Sony hasn't really been pushing it? And I think they're kind of pushing it in a different way, but granted, I'm not sure if it's actually a better way. So what do I mean? The game's actually kind of done almost like a tour, and we've seen this over the summer. A couple games have taken this strategy, right? You think of a game like a Phantom Blade Zero, which is God knows how far away, right? But you have these games that are kind of just appearing everywhere, right? They'll be at Summer Game Fest, they'll be at Gamescom, they'll be at Tokyo Game Show, they might be at China Joy, they might, anywhere, PAX, all of these different Comic-Con type things. And it's so almost grassroots-like, right? Where, and I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I think it's good in the sense that, hey, you go to these conventions, you go to these Comic-Cons, whatever. They have, like, the gaming booths. Astro is there. You can check it out, right? Like, that is cool. And I never want that stuff to go away. Like, that's a product of, like, 15, 20 years ago that's slowly been, like, eroded. And eventually it will be gone, but not yet. So thank God, right? But at the same time, you look at the promotional end, and this is why, like, is it a positive or a negative? I think there is still power to releasing, like, a trailer that gets, like 3 to 6 million views, right? There's something very powerful about that. And they're not really doing that. Now, am I worried about it? I'm honestly not. I got to be real. Like, maybe, I don't really, I've said this before, like, the PlayStations of the world, Xbox, like these mega millions or billions of corporations, do I care necessarily about, their income? Not really. I will say I have more of a connection to Astro, and it's like I do care. I do want the game to do well. I do want the game to sell well because I believe in it. Okay, so I want a game to succeed that I care about, right? But I also think, as we've talked about a couple times, I think what Astro stands for is also very important, right? And if the game does terribly, if it sells 200,000, that's not sending a good message for, what we want PlayStation to experiment with a little bit, right? So the opposite end of that is if this game does well, if it sells a couple million, maybe 3, 4, 5 million, is that an indicator that, hey, I'm not saying, I know I always bring up Sly, right? But it's any of them, Sly, Ratchet, continuing Ratchet, I guess, right? Jak and Daxter, platformers, maybe a little bit more kid-like, Lego Horizon, right? Can we inject some of this into PlayStation? And, we're getting it here and there, but it's not, I want it to be more, I guess, right? So I can't lie and say, like, well, I don't care if Astro does good or bad. I do care. I do want it to do well. I don't know, though, if what they're doing is going to impact it, because I like, on one hand, and okay, I'm going to kind of like ramble off a couple things. You guys try to stay with me in the comments, okay? So Astro, like the first trailer, did really well, and I think the biggest thing to take away from that is also the likes to dislikes. It's outrageous. It's so much positivity for that first one, okay? So say that's a positive, right? It also did well in terms of views. There really hasn't been anything else like it. But I will say, back in the Summer Game Fest era, a couple months ago, and it has been a couple months, that's kind of the issue, right? You had previews, you had people being able to play the game, and it was largely the same footage. It wasn't even a ton of new stuff, and that stuff did well too on social media. Like, people, liked it. Another positive is the controllers. The controllers, I feel like they did quite a few of them, and they sold out a few times. Now, I actually was able to get mine a couple hours actually in, but the PS Direct had to go through it a few times where they sold out. They did it again a couple hours later, sold out, did it again. So I also feel like just doing a controller on a game is also something where it's like, okay, you kind of are pushing it. I know, like, Concord maybe also has a controller, so maybe that's a bad example, but I feel like there is want from PlayStation for this to do well. I think the weirdest part of it is just we are 2 weeks out, and we have gotten very little. So, like, that is where I would very much agree that, like, their strategy, I'm not that big of a fan of, and I don't know if that, it's going to work at the end of the day, because when there is stuff for Astro, but I guess on the other hand, aside of things, right? When there is stuff for Astro, it does well. So it's like, do you need to show more stuff, right? Because the trailer did well. The previews, like the week later, did well. The controller did well. Like, there clearly was engagement online. Now, engagement online doesn't necessarily mean the world cares, but it is, it is something. So every time it's popped up, it's done rather well. It just hasn't popped up all that much. We also just haven't seen officially. We haven't seen a lot of it. There was a leak like a week or two ago. I did not watch it. I did not watch the leak, but an okay portion of the game actually leaked, and I think like actual bots of properties and franchises, and that might be the most we know about the game if you went down that road to learn about it, right? Like we don't have that much actual footage of it, so maybe a con. But again, now to play devil's advocate again on myself, and I've said this. Do we need to see a lot of it? This is what's interesting about it is, so many things are interesting, I guess, to me. But, for me, I don't need to see a lot about this game. So it's kind of weird because, like, specifically for me, I really think we've seen enough. And, we haven't actually seen much at all. But I'm sold in immediately. You know what I mean? If you think about it, Astro's Playroom is the highest selling PlayStation game of all time, right? Maybe actually, PlayStation in general, definitely highest selling PS5 game of all time, maybe even also PS4. Everybody that got the PS5, I don't know if they've played it. I kind of doubt that, but I'd say a good amount of them. And I wonder, actually, follow me through with this idea because I just thought of this now. I wonder if that's almost why they haven't done anything, right? This is a game very similar to Astro's Playroom. If you've played Playroom, you probably have a good idea of what this game is going to be, right? Nothing is going to massively shock you. So many, 62 million PS5s or whatever the number is, maybe even higher than that. Say half the PS5 owners played at some point in their lives part of Astro's Playroom. You may have had 20 to 40 million people that experienced Astro's Playroom. Maybe they played an hour, 20 minutes, 2 hours, 5 hours. You know what I mean? So they played it a little bit. That's a good amount of people. That is like the biggest play test you could ever ask for. You know what I mean? So I wonder if, and maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe I'm actually giving them too much credit where I think they're in the offices saying, this game is similar. We know people like it because we have all this data from the PS5, and people did actually play Playroom, and and so they're strategizing, right? I could be giving them too much credit. They could be doing none of that, and they just could not care about Astro Bot, right? But I want to believe that they care because I also think about the fall. And PlayStation really is actually kind of playing from behind when it comes to like console wars. And they're leading in terms of the console itself, right? And Xbox is bringing games to them and all that stuff. But when it comes to the actual games coming out this fall, they have Astro Bot. And they have Silent Hill 2, which is not even technically theirs. It's Konami's, but it's coming out on there. They're succeeding with Black Myth because that's kind of only on PlayStation as well as PC and doing really well in China. So, they're being helped out here and there, and they're probably going to have a pretty good fall. But, like, Astro Bot is actually pretty important. I feel like it should be pretty important to them. So I don't think they'd want it to fail. And I don't think they'd want any game to fail because at the end of the day, you've put money into it and you probably at least want to get that money back. So I don't know, it's why I want to make this video because it's an interesting conversation. I don't think they've done enough, but I also think they've done kind of different things. And then it's also like, this is actually kind of a game unlike any others because it's kind of a sequel to an original game that's almost a tech demo for the PS5 that came bundled with it. So it's a sequel that, do you need much promotion of it? And also it's a platformer with all these levels and bosses, and you don't really show those off. You really shouldn't show. Now, I'm not saying show nothing, but you really don't need to show off like a third of the game. If you show 40 minutes of gameplay, the game I think they've said is more like 8 to 10 hours, but if you show 40 minutes, like you might show 3, 4, 5 levels. Do people want to see 3, 4, 5 levels, or do you want to keep them a surprise, right? But then it's like, well, if you don't show anything, that's kind of an issue as well. So they're in a weird spot. But I think at the end of the day, it coming out in 2 weeks is kind of strange because I do feel we've seen very, very little from this game. I think it's made the rounds. I think, you had the journalists play and all that stuff, but I don't even know how much journalists actually play, to be honest with you. But, 2 weeks away, it's going to go out soon, isn't it? Like, I actually requested a code. I haven't heard back. I highly doubt I'm going to get it, to be honest with you. But I imagine, like, next Friday, maybe the week after, like the Monday, Tuesday, Labor Day, somewhere in that range, I think the reviews will come out for this game, and the game will be out, in 2 weeks. It's going to happen. So I don't know. It's been a weird strategy, but PlayStation has been weird, to be honest with you. They've been weird with their promotion of Spider-Man. They were weird with that. God of War, they were weird with it. They have changed in the last couple of years, PlayStation has, in terms of how they roll out like the marketing stuff. And for Astro, we'll see if it works. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.